Putting humans back into technology with Gethin Ellis and Mark Williams. Welcome to the 11th edition of the Fit Podcast. Here at gethinellis.com, whilst we know physical fitness is essential, our mental health is vital too, and our Fit Podcast is all about putting the human back into technology, aka fit. One thing we can probably all agree on is the last year or so has been unprecedented, so we wanted to seek out the views of technology leaders, business owners, consultants, many others from a range of different businesses and organisations to discuss with them the impacts on their business, their humans, and on their technology, and how they see the future unfolding. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to episode 11, where we speak to Tim Golborun.
Welcome to the 11th episode of the Putting the Human Back into Technology podcast. Today, Mark and I are joined by the current interim director of finance for the Royal College of Physicians. We're joined by Tim Golborun. Tim, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
And thank you for having me. Pleased to be here.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. We'll jump straight in with the first question. Tim, we'll get you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do, your business, and your job role, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Gethin. Thanks, Mark. And look, as I said, so pleased to be here. So, yeah, I'm currently the interim Director of Finance at the Royal College of Physicians. I took a bit of a career break earlier in the year and decided to do interim work. I mean, look, finance is my background. You know, I'm a qualified accountant. And actually, interestingly, although I never designed it this way, I've worked in health all of my career. So, you know, I started in the NHS. I worked at the Royal College of Nursing. I've been involved in charities. They've been involved in health, particularly mental health. And just now I'm doing an interim role at the Royal College of Physicians. So I think what's interesting actually is that as a finance director, and I found this increasingly during my career, is it's always finance plus, and the plus gets more and more. So, you know, it's never everything together, but any combination of IT, estates, governance, some form of operational service, marketing, or whatever. And what's interesting though, actually, is currently I am just finance, although I have to say there's nothing just about finance, you know, because you have to get engaged in every part of the business. So it actually feels like a bit like going back to my roots, really, and you know where it all started. But so that's a bit of background, about me and my career to date.
Thanks, Tim. I'm really pleased that you know the career break worked out nicely for you. I've never had one of those, but tempted to ask you some questions if you enjoyed it or was it stressful. But we won't divulge into that today. We won't. Okay. But I'm glad you're doing all right, and I'm glad the interim work's working out for you. Yeah. Mark, I'll hand over to you for the second question.
Yeah, so that I didn't know you were gonna describe things in that way, Tim. But obviously, you and I have worked quite closely together, you know, on a couple of occasions, and Geth's been involved with that, you know, as well through a different angle. But the think about the breadth of things. Obviously, you're focused on one thing now, but it's still about people, right? So I'm wondering about. We've got to change this question because we keep saying over the last year, it's not the last year, right? Over the last whatever it is now, I don't know, 16, 17 months or something. What kind of things have you learned that you want to take forwards? Because we all had to do some JFDI stuff, right? But what are you going to take out of that, and how is that going to play about, you know, between the technology side, the people side, talk about mental health, the impact on people, etc. What will you take forward? What lessons have you learned, and what will you take forwards in current role or advice to future clients?
Good question. First of all, JFDI.
Oh, I can't spell out what that means.
Swear word in there. I had to do the math. Oh, okay. If I was just do it, but it's probably by night for.
I'm with you. Yeah. No, look, a great question, and it's something I've been reflecting on. But in some ways, I think you can possibly overthink this one. I suppose what's been clear to me is that I tend to think of things very simply. And for me, whether, you know, as I said at the outset, you know, my background's been in statutory sector, not-for-profit sector, but I think whatever sector you're in, I think it probably boils down to three key things, really. You know, one is about clarity of purpose, you know, and the other one I think is about customer service, and I think the third one is about people management and engagement of staff, and they're not in any particular order, and I think they all jostle for positions. But I guess my reflection is that those three things, you know, certainly have not gone away, or I don't necessarily think new things have come on with the, you know, the really difficult conditions that we've all had to operate in over the last sort of well, getting on for 18 months, I guess. Before long, I just think they've become really heightened, and I guess, I mean, at a macro level, you know, organisations have, you know, some successful organisations that have had strong business models. They might have been very strong in all of those three areas. You know, good clarity of purpose, good people skills, you know, good customer service, and they've you know, suffered. So I think in a way what it's done is to heighten the importance of those business areas. But in a way, I mean, I think what's happened is actually achieving those becomes much more difficult. You know, the whole engagement. How do you engage with your workforce? How do you engage with your customers? You know, how do boards engage and really do that important strategic work? Because, you know, even at a very basic level, you know, sitting around a room, flip charts, whiteboards, and I can see one behind you there, Mark. I mean, I'm very impressed to see that.
Whiteboard, but I mean, on a roll, Tim. Whiteboard on a roll. That's
whiteboard on a roll, yeah. But I mean, I think it's those things. So I don't know if that helps in terms. I mean, anyway, it's my perspective on it, really. So I don't think there's necessarily anything new, but I think what it does is it means that those things can very quickly diminish when you're, you know, as people are working at home, you know, your front room, your back room, your, you know, converted bedroom into a study, or wherever you're working from, and you don't get that face-to-face people connection, and I think you have to work really hard at it. And so I guess some of the lessons are just the heightened importance of those core business skills, those core business objectives, you know, and how you can successfully deploy those working in a remote way.
I think that's really, well, first, I think it's top class advice. I also love the fact that the word clarity is in there, as you will well know. I don't know whether you brought that for my benefit or not. But do you know what? Geth, as he tells me quite regularly, he says he's been reading a lot of books recently, and I can't remember which book this was in, but you'll probably tell me in a minute. We were talking about this phrase a few weeks ago, when deciding whether to do something, does it make the boat go faster? Yeah. And, you know, and at the end of the day, you know, we were talking to somebody else recently in a not-for-profit, but well, I won't mention who. But the clarity of purpose around a lot of not-for-profits, membership organisations, trade unions, and so on and so forth, it's actually written down. You know, that's why they're there. Yeah. You know, and we'll get onto this in a second. But it's you know, for me, it's so great to hear, looking back and going, do you know what? We need to get all this other stuff out of the way. To use Gethin's terminology borrowed from whoever it is, you know, does it make the boat go faster? What's relevant to our clarity? What's our purpose? You know, where, you know, customer journey, customer service, customer experience, all words like that to describe that, and how you get your organisation, which is predominantly people. Yes. To do the stuff that they need to do to deliver on that clarity of purpose and delight your customers. I do think that, you know, I have to sigh occasionally, as you know, when I've been in previous, you know, things. And you think, why are we doing that? You know, yes. I do think that's okay. You've got to humour people from some time, and sometimes you do need to do these things to get buy-in. You know, but it is all down to those simple three things, and I really like the simplicity of what you've just said, and I mean that as a compliment. I think it's fantastic.
I mean, it is hard though, Mark. I mean, I've one of the things I've noticed. I mean, I said, I've recently, I'm 7 or 8 weeks into this interim role, and starting in a new organisation remotely is hard. I mean, I saw it in my old role where new people came in, and it's that thing about how do you understand the business of the organisation, because in the past you drop into team meetings, you meet people, you have those corridor conversations, all of those things. I'm sure we all discuss. But it's also about how you make an impact, how people get to know you, how people get to know your values and your what you bring to the table. I think so for me it is I think my overriding message is I don't think anything fundamentally has changed in terms of what we need to do. I think it's just become a lot harder, and we have to work at it a lot harder in order to make it happen. But yeah, it is hard, I think, coming into an organisation where day one, you're not walking down the corridor trying to find out where to get the tea and coffee and who sits where. It is you're on a remote call, like this, trying to make connections. Yeah. And but it just means you have to work really hard at it.
Yeah,
that's probably a nice little sort of segue into the third question we were going to ask Tim, because I was a bit worried as I was sat here thinking, I'm going to ask this now, and I'm not really sure how it's going to fit in with your current role, but I think it does really. The question is, have your users grown in confidence using technology during lockdown? And just by your answer there, clearly people have, because they've had to. But I'll just let you answer that question. Don't put words in your mouth.
I think they have. I mean, there's nothing like being thrown in the deep end. I mean, I think. Look, I mean, I'm all for doing things properly. I mean that comes, I guess, partly through the sort of the finance discipline, but I mean, I know it's a value that many of us share. But if you think, very rapidly, we had to deploy, staff to work at home, getting Teams, Zoom, whatever other sort of technologies to use. I think staff and customers actually, I think, have adapted really well to the new technology. It's not been for everyone, but I've actually, I mean, I've been really impressed actually. I think in certainly the roles I've been in, just how well organisations have adapted to that remote way of working, and technology has helped with that. I think there are challenges, undoubtedly, and not just the obvious ones we talked about earlier in terms of making that connection and everything being a bit more remote. But I think some very practical things. I mean, boring things like signing documents. So it's not just Teams and Zoom. It's about documents that are used to being signed. How do you do that? I mean, one of the things, with my sort of FD hat on, I always like the sort of the show me. I learned very early on in my career, after some quite challenging audits, about how it's really important to stay close to, things like reconciliations, and so show me the year-end file, show me the reconciliations, show me this, and of course all those things become much harder in this remote way of working, and so I think that's a challenge, and supposed to not to dampen the mood too much, but things like fraud, I think the susceptibility to those sort of things we've all seen where it's very easy to be susceptible to something that isn't genuine. Where someone's looking to so I think at a very mechanical level, I think people have got used to it, but I do think there are some real challenges in those areas that I've mentioned.
Can I put you on the spot, Tim? And I wouldn't do this unless we know each other well. I suspect that you will have an answer to this. But I'm really intrigued by that. Looking through the lens of a technologist, right? So I'm really intrigued by your comment about take the reconciliations example as your example about So why is it so hard to do that? Because if you look through the eyes of a technologist, you'll say, oh, well, fine, we can do a screen share and we can show you this file on OneDrive or wherever it is. Perhaps can you explain to the listeners why that is so difficult? I mean, in your home ground, if you like, of finance.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, look, screen shares are great. I mean, but there's no. I mean, I suppose it's the discipline of having things in one place. You know, that concept, for example, at annual accounts time of a year-end file. You know, that you. I mean, in days gone by, physically handing it over to the auditors. And having everything in one place, and so you get a sense of you turn the pages, you can see the numbers, you can see you can flick backwards and forwards. I mean, yes, it is possible on the screen. I mean, I suppose there's an underlying theme here in my sort of responses is that of course those things are there. I just think they are much harder. They are much harder, and I one of the things I've struggled with, I think, I suppose I don't know if we all do, is understanding other people's spreadsheets. I think, I don't know what it is, but somehow you have to get yourself in the mindset of the person who's created the spreadsheet. So you're absolutely right, Mark. I mean, you can share the screen and someone shows you a number here and then tracks back to another tab or something else and shows you where it is. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it's me, but I'm a very sort of visual person. And
let me help you out a little bit with my thinking on that, because I think it's about my sense. It's about our ingrained working practices. When I was IT director for a law firm, I think, as you know, and similar sort of concept. A lawyer would have an A4 lever arch file of stuff to do with that case, right? And they just knew that if they flick through quickly, they would, on page 134 or whatever it was, that would be the key bit of item that they wanted for that particular time.
Yeah.
Of course, you can do all of that, and you can stick it as an index on an online document, etc., etc. But boy, getting them to change a practice from years, and I'm not being unkind, but years of ingrained practice in there, because you trust it, it works, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah.
The difficulty, of course, in the last year is that you've had to fix it because you can't. You just can't do what you used to do, and I guess whether you. It would be an interesting thing to see whether people revert to some of these things once whenever it's going to be we're all a bit normal or
19th of July we're all back to normal.
Yes.
Not in Wales, mate. Not in Wales.
But well, what can you do?
Look, I think one of the great things actually about, I mean, I haven't mentioned it, but I'm sure others have, is actually organisations have been too paper-based. I mean, some organisations anyway. And I think one of the great things is actually, we've learned to live without having to print everything. But again, Mark, just looking at that flip chart behind your head, I mean, some things just work better visually.
I love a visual, and that's the way it works for me.
And yes, you can create some of it on a screen, and you can create PDFs, but there are just some things, and of course there are ways around it. You can always do it, absolutely. So your point earlier about yes, you can show it on a spreadsheet and something else, but I think so. Maybe it is one of the learning things we just have to get used to, which is look, this is the new world, and you're not going to be able to have flip charts, whiteboards, lever arch files full of things. You're going to have to find a different way to it. But it is. I guess it is. Maybe it's my age, and I've been sort of that's the way I was, brought up. Really, is the physical file and turning a page and cross-referencing things. And I think it has been difficult for auditors as well. I think in terms of even that physical show me thing, I think it is part of the bread and butter work really, and so I think shifting that mindset and shifting that practice, I think is something we're going to have to do.
Well, you're not alone, because one of our other guests actually, we were talking about how different types of people coped with the change of, and we were generalising between one part we were generalising between introverts and extroverts, and another part we were generalising between IT people and finance people. And interestingly enough, actually finance was the area that this person picked on, as actually they found it quite difficult, because they were very reliant on what he called office-based procedures and processes. simple things like printing out shed loads of paper on A3 or whatever, because it's it's visually you can get your head around it. So you're not alone in that at all. But I guess if it's for the wider good, sometimes you can't move when you're trying to make a change. You can't move everything forwards, and sometimes one or two things have to go backwards. And sometimes one or two things have to stay the same. But if it's better in the round, then it's the right thing to do. So we're coming towards the end of part one. We've got one more question, haven't we?
One more question, it's your question, Mark. Yeah, one last question in part one.
So what's the best piece of advice, business or career advice you've ever been given, Tim?
An old boss of mine had this saying, work the problem. And it's something that stuck with me, I think, for a long time. And look, people have used different phrases or different ways of expressing it, but I think you know what I mean, which is look, if there's a problem, you've really got to tackle it. You've really got to face it head on. So I suppose the answer to your question is more. I mean, I could talk about the career one, but it is more the work related one, I guess. But actually, I think wherever you are in an organisation, you're going to come across problems. It's a fact. It's a fact of life. It's a fact of organisational life. Things don't run always easily. They don't run always to plan, and you will encounter to issues. You will encounter problems, and it's a very, unless it sounds so obvious, but actually it's really important. And in fact, it concurs with what I suppose one of my first bosses said. I mean, this predates, email and everything else, because he physically used a bit of paper, and I was in his office once, and he said, "Look, Tim," he said, "look, I've got a bit of paper here, and it's a problem." And he said, it'd be very easy to me. And he opened his desk drawer to put it in his bottom drawer and say to shove it away in there. But he said, "Look, that's the worst thing I could do. Very easy now." But he says, "What I've got to do now is to tackle it." And so it's been a recurring theme, really, and it doesn't, it doesn't necessarily come easy or naturally, but I do think, but it's a really good bit of advice, because problems don't go away, they tend to get worse, and therefore, tackling them, and people will tackle them in different ways. I mean, my style might be different to yours and different to Gethin's, but the important thing is, you sit down. Sometimes you do it alone. Sometimes you might do it with other people. But the important thing is to work at it. To tackle it, to address it, and that I think has really stuck with me really throughout my career.
Thank you, Tim. That's really insightful. Thank you for sharing that for us. And that brings us nicely to the end of part one. Hopefully, everyone will join us again in part two.